In previous videos, we've talked about the Network Explorer, and we've talked about the basic structure of the cost modules. Now we're moving on to talk about the settings module. So let's switch to settings, and note that if we want to create a new setting, we can simply right-click in the panel to bring up our context menu, or we can click the icon. Both will create a new setting. When the new setting is created, it will be exactly the same as the master setting. We can then rename the setting and change the settings in accordance with our requirements. It's interesting to note that the setting that is used in the software is selected by the tree, not by which setting is open. The same also applies to costs. As with the costs, we can make comparisons by selecting two settings and using the widget here, which will then tell us if there are any differences between the settings. This is useful when you're building up an analysis to remind yourself of why there are more than one setting. Often we will, however, be using the master cost and the master settings in our analysis. If we open up the master settings, we can see that there are a range of areas for different settings to do with repairs, renewal, interruptions, trench trust ratio, traffic, water loss, prioritization, extra renewal, pressure management, cluster rules, ratings, and other. So the general settings allow us to set up various time horizons that are used in the model. For example, the strategic planning horizon is how long the simulations are run over. The repairs reflect the proportion of pipes within given materials that are expected to be clamped or unclamped, and whether or not we want to specify that the failures always cause an interruption. The assumption is if the pipe is clamped, there will be no interruption. However, we can force the software to assume there is interruption on all repairs simply by clicking one of the boxes here. If this box is clipped, all failures on AC pipe will cause an interruption. In the renewal sections, there are a range of settings related to how the company renews pipes. Most importantly is the type of pipe material that is used to replace old pipes. Interruptions allows the simulation tool to model the occurrence of interruptions in terms of the times and the impact those will have, as well as whether the extra annual failures will actually cause interruptions. Trench trust ratio indicates whether a pipe material can be replaced by trench trust technologies and what proportion of those pipes are. As noted before, it is possible to set up PARMS with internal consequence models to do with traffic. The way the models work is to use measures of traffic density in relation to the costs associated with the road type. In terms of water loss, models can be set up to define leakage and flooding models. The prioritization area is quite an important area from the perspective of the way the PARMS software works. The pipe prioritization factor weightings are used to weight the importance of different pipe prioritization factors in terms of their influence on the renewal. The cluster rank weightings are specified to give the ranking of clusters relative to each other depending on the importance criteria of the company. And you're advised to refer to the manual around how the prioritization is set up. The other parts of the prioritization screen are to do with setting up the BC calculations so that risk costs can be taken into consideration along with OPEX and CAPEX. Expected service life is only used in lifecycle cost analysis. There is no other age-based reasoning in PARMS. Price index is used to increase the cost of legacy repairs to modern day dollar terms. Cluster risk basis and cluster capital prioritization and cluster prioritization columns will be dealt with in another video. Extra renewal relates to how the simulation attempts to build up clusters. When we're using the priority clusters, we use data and models to build up our clusters. In the simulation, a similar process is modeled in the algorithm, and part of that is to decide which extra pipes to replace given a trigger pipe needs to be replaced. Pressure management is where we set up the pressure management schemes that are to be applied in the simulations, as can be visualized through the pressure management widget. Cluster rules help us define how clusters are built when we're using priority clusters, and will be dealt with in another video. Ratings are where we set up how risk will be displayed in the GIS parts of the software as per these color and descriptions. It's also where we set up the risk rankings. As you can see, if we take a likelihood rating and an importance rating like criticality, we can map them onto different zones of risk. Similarly, we can map risk ratings onto risk rankings using this table here. The other part of this setting is to tell the software how we will define likelihood ratings in terms of predicted or actual failure ratings. Finally, the other part of the settings allows us to define whether we're using a rolling 12-month period, which is the base approach, and we don't recommend it's changed, and also what costs get deducted from the budgets that are set in the simulation.